Happy New Year and welcome to Series 7 of I Am, I Have, brought to you by Happiful Magazine and Counselling Directory. Today I'm joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Julie Smith, and we'll be focusing on the subject of burnout, as well as her brilliant new book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? We'll also be chatting about the impact of her supportive social media content around mental health and well-being. We know that the subject of burnout is a huge one and pressing for many of us.
There's this drive for be more, do more, all of that kind of thing. And actually, the cost of that is the queue of people outside the therapy room door saying, I'm completely burnt out and I don't know what I'm doing with my life now. And my health is down the drain. There is a price to pay for relentless productivity that doesn't prioritize your health.
Dr. Julie offers her thoughts on the causes, practical advice on what to do when you're moving towards burnout, and the everyday tools that can help. Before we start today's episode, I'd love to encourage you to download the free Happiful app. You can read our digital magazine whenever and wherever you want, and search for the perfect therapist, life coach, nutritionist, or hypnotherapist for you. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I love talking to Dr. Julie Smith. We'd love it if you could rate, review, and share I Am, I Have. It helps us to know what you'd like to hear more of and allows other people to find us. On today's podcast, I have the privilege of welcoming Dr. Julie Smith. Julie is a clinical psychologist who also shares amazing and supportive mental health content across social media and has most recently written a phenomenal book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? Today, we'll be talking about Dr. Julie's work on and offline and the subject of burnout, which we know is a huge one for our listeners. So welcome, Dr. Julie.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Obviously, we've seen a huge amount of you on social media, but now I've got a chance to read your book as well. There is so much we want to talk about, but let's start with you telling us what you think we should know about you.
Sure. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist. I worked in the NHS for 10 years, and started this very small private practice so that I could sort of manage work more easily around my children and things like that. And during that time, I had lots of people coming along for therapy who, once they had the sort of educational aspect of therapy, so lots of people don't realize that, therapy isn't just about talking. You kind of learn a little bit about how your mind works, how you can influence your emotions and your mood and things like that. And for a lot of people, once they had that bit of education, they were sort of raring to go. They found that so empowering so that they felt that they could sort of manage their own mental health day to day more easily. And so I would sort of harp on at home about how, this information should be more available. People shouldn't have to pay to come and see someone like me to find out these sort of life skills. And so my husband said, well, go on then, make it available and, go put something on YouTube or something like that. So we did. We started to make a couple of videos initially for YouTube and at the same time discovered TikTok. And so we started to make some really short videos with just sort of bite-sized bits of information for people to take on board. I was really nervous about it. Thought, gosh, I'm going to be trolled or booed out of there. And, I thought, well, if it doesn't work out, we can just delete it and pretend it never happened. As it happens, people wanted that kind of information and it just sort of blew up within a matter of weeks. And that was the November before the first lockdown. So it just became this huge roller coaster ride. And we're now on, I think 3 million followers on TikTok and then another 500,000 on Instagram and more on YouTube. So it's become this sort of big community of really supportive, kind people who are really, people ask me about trolling and things like that, but they're such a supportive community who are all keen to learn about, how they can keep themselves well and help themselves to thrive and that sort of thing. So 2 years on, here we are.
It's incredible. I mean, as you said, over 3 million people on TikTok, 500,000 on Instagram, who are all wanting to know more about how they can support themselves, their mental health, their daily health, resilience. And your content really taps into that because it's, as you said, bite-sized pieces of information that really resonate with people. The amount of times I've watched one of your posts and gone, oh, yes. And it's really made me take something on board, whether that's about, talking to myself more compassionately or thinking about the way I'm behaving in my work life. I think it really is hitting home with people. Do you have a sense of what that is and why it is resonating so much?
I think I've tried to keep everything very much based on the things that we all face. And that's definitely how I've structured the book as well, is looking at, rather than sort of clinical diagnoses, is about the stresses and strains that we all face. So, there's a section on low mood, and there's a section on fear and anxiety, on motivation, on stress, on relationships, all those sorts of things. So, the sorts of life problems that we all face at some point, and there are these sets of skills that help us to get through. They don't make your life a problem free, but they're tools to help you take on those problems and get through to the other side.
And you just mentioned the book there, and this is your first book. Why has nobody told me this before? As you said, you have different chapters on issues that affect us all in life. Tell us a bit about what you put in the book and how you want people to use that book.
Sure. Well, I want it to be a resource. The short form video platforms were incredible for helping me to reach lots of people, but you're restricted to that 60-second limit on your videos. So there's only so much detail you can get into a video. I had lots of feedback from people saying, I'd love more details on this, or how can I do that? And I want it step by step. And so we've started to put sort of some longer videos on YouTube with some of those step by steps. But I also wanted this one place where people could go to, you could keep it on your coffee table. And then as, different things get thrown at you in life, that you could dip in, go right to that section and look at, okay, what helps? What's helped other people in these sorts of scenarios? And how can I use those, with some really clear, detailed step by step. So I've kept it all, those normal problems that we all face at some point, and also things like, how to help other people, because for every person who's struggling with something, they're surrounded in family and friends who are thinking, oh, I'm not really sure how to support them. I don't know what I'm supposed to say or what I'm supposed to do. So there's also a section on that and how you can kind of support someone who's struggling. So I just really wanted it to be this toolbox for everybody, because it's, you don't have to have a clinical diagnosis to make use of some of the skills that are taught in therapy.
And that comes across so strongly in the book. And also the fact that because we are experiencing something, because we are feeling something, it doesn't make it a fact. That we can start to use some of the questions in your book to perhaps shift our perception, and that it's not always good enough to just say, think good thoughts, feel better, that kind of toxic positivity. There are lots of things that will feed into how we feel at any moment in time. And sometimes the best thing to do is kind of give ourselves a bit of distance between what we feel and, looking at that. And I think that's such an incredible concept that obviously you talk about all the time and is a huge part of therapy. But until I read it in the book, it didn't really occur to me how important it is to put distance between ourselves and our moods and our feelings.
Yeah, that it's something that happens to you. It's an experience rather than who you are as such.
Your notion that emotions are information, I think, really stood out for me. It's a great piece of information that those emotions are telling us something.
Thank you.
Talking about emotions and feelings, today we're going to talk about burnout. And I'm so grateful to you for coming on to talk about this, because we know for a fact that this is something our audiences really, really want to hear more about. Over the past couple of years with both Counselling Directory and Haberful, people have been researching burnout because it's been a tough couple of years. I mean, we're now in 2022, but the last 2 years have been significantly difficult on a number of different levels for a number of different people. And although we might have just had Christmas, a lot of people will have worked through that. Or as we know, when you have families, no matter what your family looks like, even a festive season can be work and can be taxing emotionally. So let's talk about burnout. And perhaps you could start by telling us how you define burnout. But what does burnout mean?
So burnout it was conceptualized by researchers who were looking into chronic workplace stress. And that's why if you look it up on things like the World Health Organization websites and stuff like that, they will say, this only applies to workplace stress and shouldn't be applied elsewhere. But that is because that's where the research started, because there was profit to be made in working out how to keep your staff well. And so that's where all the, the research has been done. As a clinician who's worked with people outside of paid employment, I see that same collection of symptoms in people who are unpaid carers, parents, foster parents, all sorts of people who aren't in paid employment still experience burnout, in my opinion. So it's not a clinical diagnosis. It's not something you go to your doctor and be diagnosed with. It's not a disorder. It's this collection of symptoms or a syndrome that, if it's present, would have a significant impact on your mental health and your physical health. So it's a really serious health issue that we can't ignore. You have to address it.
And if you don't address it, it will find a way of outing itself, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you think about sort of chronic stress, it's a bit like taking money out of a bank account. So if you've got a certain degree of resources, so you've got a certain amount of money in that bank account, and continuing on with chronic stress and not addressing it is a bit like just withdrawing money without ever putting any back in. You need some level of replenishment. Otherwise, there is a point at which you reach zero and you feel like you've got nothing left. And then, then there's sort of big amounts of time off work and much more intense problems.
That was a great analogy that you had there. And you also talk in your book about it's like driving a car in second gear on the motorway. You can do it, but there's ultimately going to be some damage. And I wondered whether burnout is something that you've dealt with personally as well as professionally.
I'm a mother of 3 young children and also trying to, run a business and earn money. And so any, I say working parent, but any parent actually, or working individual can relate. And, I think there are times, especially through the pandemic, where lots of us have become emotionally, physically, or mentally sort of exhausted by prolonged stress as we're trying to kind of get through difficult times. And so, everyone coming through the pandemic will probably have some degree of sort of relatability to that idea of that sort of emotional exhaustion that can hit you. And especially when I sort of started my very small private practice so that I could have a really good balance in life and be there for the children and control my working hours. And then once I started the social media work and it really took off, it will just gobble up as much time as you're willing to give it. So I have to be really quite conscious in my decisions now about how I balance the week, and taking a day back to be with my smallest son who's not at school yet and things like that, so that I don't burn out myself. I have to kind of practice what I preach.
People will relate to that as a parent, as someone who's working, and as you said, even if you're not a parent or you're working or whatever your circumstances are, there will be a point at which, with everything else that's going on in the world, you can get depleted. I wondered whether this is something you've seen in your practice increase, not just over the past 2 years with the pandemic, but generally. Have you seen an increase in people reporting or talking about what you perceive to be burnout?
Well, certainly the content that I've been producing on burnout has received lots of feedback. So lots of people are sort of resonating with it and thinking, oh, hang on, this is me, what now? And people sort of asking for tips and things like that. But also the data shows that, burnout seems to be even more of a problem. And also lots of people who were working from home during the pandemic felt like they weren't being productive enough, but were actually being more productive than they would have been at work, because things like the daily commute and, lunchtime breaks, going out to get sandwiches or whatever, those small pockets of time during the day were actually breaks that were being filled up with just sitting at the desk and continuing to work. So, people were getting more done, but then feeling more drained by, not having those pockets of time.
I can completely agree with that. And also the idea of working from home and being in the home and feeling like there were things I could do in the pocket of time when I would usually go and make a cup of tea and chat to someone. Perhaps I was putting on a load of washing, or, kind of cramming that time and feeling like almost masking anxiety with productivity, which can leave you feeling quite burnt out.
Yeah, some of those sort of smaller things can give you a little bit of a sense of control in the chaos, can't they? If you can manage to get the house clean, or if you can manage to get X, Y, and Z done and clear the desk, then things will feel a bit more manageable. And there's something to be said for that to a degree. But also, I think in our culture, there's this real idea that productivity is it's sort of linked to our self-worth in some way, and then it becomes difficult to take breaks because people feel guilty about not doing something productive. And then it instead of seeing taking a break as something that you do to maintain your health in the same way that you do when you're cleaning your teeth in the morning, you're looking after your dental health. It's just something you do. Whereas sitting down to take a break has become this thing that's associated with laziness rather than good health, which needs addressing, I think.
You're so right. And it's something that we hear quite a lot and we write about quite a lot, is putting in that time to rest. And it should be a natural part of your daily flow, is that you have that downtime. And yet, with the culture perhaps that's emerged, those words, things like side hustle and, the need to learn, the need to keep on improving and evolving, it's almost as if there is a pushback against rest. Do you see that in your clients and people that you talk to as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And online, and I was on the radio yesterday when they were talking about it. Loads of people were calling in saying, these sort of self-help gurus as well online, saying, you sleep when you're dead and get up earlier, and all those kind of things. And you just, there's this drive for be more, do more, all of that kind of thing. And actually the cost of that is, the queue of people outside the therapy room door saying, I'm completely burnt out and I don't know what I'm doing with my life now, and my health is down the drain. There is a price to pay for relentless productivity that doesn't prioritize your health.
That's fantastic. And perhaps we can go on to burnout itself and how you might start to see that in somebody. What would be the signs? Obviously, everybody is completely different, but what would be the signs of burnout, perhaps in ourselves or in others, that we could look out for?
Sure. So, everyone probably has an idea of the signs of their own stress levels going up. So it might be, some people might get low in mood, or they might have pockets of anxiety throughout the day. There might be sleep disturbance. Some people either struggle to fall asleep or struggle to stay asleep. There might be that sort of tired but wired feeling. You're exhausted from your day, but you're still not able to sleep because you're worrying about lots of things. There might be sort of conflict in your relationships because you're both stressed and tired, and then not sort of dealing with things in the way that you normally would. You might withdraw socially. You might feel less able to kind of focus or concentrate at work. And you might lose your sense of satisfaction at work as well. And that might be paid employment, but I think it could be anything else too. That you might lose that sense of the rationale for why you're doing that thing that normally drives you or normally makes you feel satisfied when you reach certain goals and stuff like that. So you might sort of lose motivation for those things, and it all just sort of starts to deteriorate. And some people are kind of set up stages of burnout, but I think less about stages and more of a sort of continuum. It's on a continuum that gradually increases, so it can creep up on you over a matter of months or even years. So we have to get good at recognizing the signs of stress in ourselves and seeing them as something we have to take note of. It's a serious health issue. Stress is meant to be a short-term measure for our bodies, and it works really well to keep us going if we use it in the short term. But if it's in the long term, like we were saying about either the bank account sort of metaphor of keep taking money out, or the idea of sort of driving on the motorway in second gear, it's only so long you can do that before you're going to reach some problems. So sort of getting to grips with what stress looks like in your body and in your mind, and then responding to it is really important.
That's a great overview of all the different ways it can touch your life. And there was something that you mentioned in the book, which I was really intrigued about, which is that sense of detachment. And I think it's something that we've seen lots of people searching for, feeling detached, feeling like nothing hits them in terms of whether it's positive or negative. It just feels like everything, even socializing or seeing people they love, feels like part of the chore of life, things that have to be done. Is there anything you can say about that and that kind of feeling of detachment?
Yeah, I think sometimes that can, indicate as well. It's a sign of depression. It's not enough in of itself, but it would be something of concern. If someone was unable to sort of feel anything, there's this idea that depression is lots of intense sadness, and actually for a lot of people, it can be an absence of emotion. So you might struggle to feel joy and excitement and love even, but you also struggle to feel sadness, so you just feel numb and you just feel empty, or you feel detached from everybody around you, and that kind of really difficult place to be, really difficult to feel that way. I think that's a sign of, you should be kind of seeking some sort of support to investigate whether that is linked to depression or something else. But certainly, given that burnout can lead to depression itself, it could be a sign that you're a little way down the road with the burnout and it really needs addressing.
And you talked about getting help for burnout. So what can we do when we recognize that we're at the point of burnout?
I think the first thing is to take it seriously, as you would with any other health issue. So if you had signs of physical health problems, you would really get to grips with what those symptoms were, start the process of sort of reporting them to a health professional, or you're doing some research about what that could mean and what might help. So starting with taking it seriously, setting in motion, addressing it. And you can kind of look at the way that your life is set out now. What are all the demands on you? If you're starting to recognize, actually, this feels a lot like burnout, what are all the demands that you're facing that are creating, huge amounts of stress? And most of us can't really choose the stress that we face. Life happens. And if you're waiting for some frightening results from your doctor, or maybe you're dealing with anxiety about something else in life, those sorts of things that we can't control, they can be there. And then there are sort of other things that might add to the stress even more and compound it and make things more difficult. So there'll be some things in that equation we can do something about, and there are other things that perhaps we need some tools to help us tolerate, and they might be things like rest and things like that. So it's really kind of, I think, looking at your life and getting things down on paper, almost mapping it out in the way that you would do in therapy, really, where you kind of get things on paper and you can get that bird's eye view of it. And then you kind of look at, okay, where in this can I make some manageable small changes that are going to help me get through this, that won't necessarily change everything. There are lots of problems that you can't get rid of, but how can you sort of replenish in small ways even that are going to help you to get through? So the small breaks might be really, really important as well. So if you have a stressful job that you have to be doing at this point because you have to keep a roof over your head, maybe those small breaks between meetings are filled with checking your emails on your phone and going off to help somebody else do something or taking on another task. But those small windows of opportunity can be rest. You can wander out to your car, sit in the car for 10 minutes, set a time on your phone and close your eyes for 10 minutes. And that becomes a really helpful, it's quite surprising when you take those small breaks, but you take them and you make them good quality rest, how replenishing they can be. But we fill all those gaps, those in between moments, with more stress. So it's taking things back a little bit, and then obviously getting sort of professional help to look at things from a sort of bigger scale and looking at making changes in other ways as well.
And you're an advocate for both meditation and using breathing. And I love the way you talk about it, because you talk about it in a very straightforward way. And you say, you don't have to be spending your days lighting incense and, meditating for hours, but actually, like you just said, going out to your car and, resting for 10 minutes rather than putting in another load of washing and trying to get some semblance of control within the household can really help. Can you talk a bit about breathing and meditation and the role that they can play?
There's just huge amounts of research now on mindfulness meditation and how helpful that can be in so many ways. It's really difficult in a world that is shouting at us all to be more and more productive all of the time to sit and do nothing. It's boring to start with, and you get this stampede of voices in your head telling you all the things you should be doing right now. So in my experience, actually, personally, but also working with people and teaching other people, is that's sometimes the most difficult part of it, is that urge to be doing other stuff. It's not something that gives you immediate results. So particularly if you're doing mindfulness, it's not restful necessarily. Sometimes it can be stressful, because you might think of things that you perhaps don't want to be thinking about, or you might find it really difficult and think, oh, my mind is so busy today, and you find it hard to sort of concentrate. It's not an easy thing to take on. But the research is there that if you are interested in learning about it and you're willing to commit to something, learning a new skill, I don't know anyone who has taken on a meditation practice and committed to it that hasn't then gone on to experience benefits. And actually, I'll often get people in therapy who'll say, I've reached a difficult time, things are a bit worse, but I haven't been meditating for like 3 weeks. And I know I need to go back to it because it helps. You kind of realize how helpful it is when you stop.
And that's interesting to hear, both the research, but also the feedback from clients, and people recognizing that when they stop the meditation, actually they are seeing an increase in feeling stressed. It's good to get those kind of first-hand reports from you. We've just entered a new year, and around this time of year, people talk about New Year's resolutions. We're not so hot on that at Happiful. We think it's just about doing the best you can every day. But if we were going to make some promises to ourselves to prevent burnout as much as we can in the months that are coming up, what do you think we could be doing?
Getting really honest with yourself, being prepared to sit down, look at your schedule of life and the things that are adding stress to you, but also doing something that I've included in the book as well is called something I call a values check-in, where you write down the things that are important to you right now. So it might be, it's really important to me to parent in the way that I want to parent. And it's really important to me to be the partner or the friend that I want to be, and to be, this type of colleague in my team at work. And, you can really kind of map those out. Then you get this picture of what's most important. Stress with meaning is slightly different to stress that doesn't feel it has meaning. We kind of pile our lives up with all of these responsibilities, some of which we need and help us to make life feel more meaningful, and others not so much. So, doing a little values checking can help you work out what's really important to me and what can go. And if something's not important to you, but it's bringing lots of stress, then it's working out, where can I make some changes?
What I love about your suggestions is that they are completely doable. They're completely doable with a pad and a piece of paper. Writing things down, we know our audiences love writing things down, as we do, but also it gives you that level of detachment to be able to look at things in black and white on the page and really think about it. So I would invite anybody listening to go and do that. Also look at the article we'll be writing about Dr. Julie on our website, because there'll be some hints on that. But also do get her book, because I am loving it, and I have a whole new notebook just to do your exercises.
I put in some things in the back as well that kind of help you work through the values check-ins and help you to kind of break it down and make it easier to, it's difficult to explain, but it makes it a bit simpler.
Well, it's wonderful to have a guide. And just before we finish, you've talked about working with a mental health professional. Can you say anything more about that, about finding a mental health professional to work with? Obviously, you are a clinical psychologist. For somebody who's listening to this who hasn't gone through working with a therapist before and is thinking about it for the first time, what would you say to them?
Do you know, it's something that's come up a lot and has actually kept me going through all the social media stuff, is the feedback that, lots of people would message and say, that post you did really inspired me to seek some help. I started therapy a few weeks ago. It's really helping. Thank you so much. I feel almost emotional kind of talking about it, because there are just loads that come through where people have been inspired to seek help. And it's only once you do, you realize just how life-changing it can be. Therapy is this place you can go to that feels scary at first, because everything that's new feels scary, right? That's just normal. And that's something I would often have that conversation on sort of the very first session with people, that it's the hardest bit. You just got to talk on that first session. And a few sessions in, your therapist becomes your go-to, and the therapy room becomes your sanctuary where you can go, and there's no judgment, and you've got someone who is going to be completely honest with you and hold you to account on things and help you work out what path you want to take next. And it's an incredible journey that people can take on, and a massive, investment in yourself. Yeah, for anyone even contemplating it, if it's possible to you and it's available to you, then go for it. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And also arming yourself with as much knowledge and information to support you in practical ways in between is great. And just a final note on your book, because obviously you talk about some of the common mental health knowledge gaps, and I wondered if you could share a few of those so that people can kind of take that away and think about it a little bit more.
Certainly something that I wanted people to take away from the book about mental health is that we shouldn't treat it any different to physical health. Health is health. And if we can, I'd love for one day it to be just as normal to say to someone, oh, I can't come, I've got a therapy appointment, as it would be to say, oh, I've just got to go to my GP appointment first. That sort of, that it would just become normal to look after your mental health, and that people would feel able to talk about it. Something else that I wanted people to take away is that you're not at the mercy of health problems. There are lots of things we can do to manage our health. In the way that we do, physical health, our mental health, we can do the same. So, that's where the book becomes a sort of toolbox, really, of there are lots of small things you can do. None of them are the silver bullet. There's not one thing you do that makes life all okay, but you build up this collection of tools that you take with you. And when life throws stuff at you, you can rummage around in the toolbox and think, right, what now? What's going to help me get through this particular time? And with those tools, you feel more able and you feel more confident to manage your own mental health through really difficult times. I guess I wanted it to be a hopeful thing that people could feel empowered to manage independently, but also seek the support when they need it.
And it absolutely does that. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today. It's been fantastic. And I am sure if you're listening to this, you will have already seen Dr. Julie Smith's TikTok, Instagram, but could you just share where people can find you just in case they haven't?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Dr. Julie, and on YouTube as well. That's a good place to go because I'm putting some sort of longer videos with more details in and stuff like that. So either YouTube or Instagram is a good place to start. But yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
And of course, don't forget your book, which is Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And that's out now. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful, and I hope we'll speak again soon.
Same.
Thank you for listening to I Am, I Have. Don't forget to check out the counselling directory or download the free Happiful app. And we'd really love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast too. And before you go, I wanted to let you know that on the Happiful app, we have information about where you can find mental health support if you need it. And if you need immediate help, Samaritans are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. Help is available. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, Lucy Donoghue for Happiful. I hope you'll listen again soon.